it's not just about Nigeria. Talking about high cost of living and a harsh 2024, Ghana also experienced it. You would remember that this year they had a lot of protests, especially after the government couldn't meet up with paying off the bond with the bond holders, domestic bonds. And so they did a lot of restructuring. I met up with a former Minister of Finance of Ghana to tell us how the year is ending for them.
Economy has some resilient, features. For example, minerals, gold, agriculture, cocoa, and lately some amount of, oil, crude oil and gas have come to complement, this base. But it is a service sector that has expanded rapidly. It is a service sector that has expanded quite rapidly. In fact, the service sector overtook agriculture and manufacturing as the largest sector, of the economy. So the main problem that faces Ghana, today has to do, with the borrowing, without much repayment mechanism, which has led to, default, of the public debt. And that has two ramifications, because the external debt, for it to be restructured, required comparability, which meant that the domestic debt should be restructured in a similar way. And so this has been done, and for the first time, Ghanaians felt what it meant, for example, to be a hippie country. Previously, external countries lent to the country, and then they forgive the debt. If you take it that it is their taxpayers who provided those monies, then in other words, their taxpayers, in addition to aid, were now supporting the repayment of loans, which we should have done. This time round, compared to HIPIC, domestic people who lent to government, particularly government bonds, also had to suffer what we call a haircut. In other words, they also had to forgive part of, the loans that they gave to government. And this hasn't gone now, too well.
What's the status of the restructured debts and the debtors at this time?
Well, the restructuring of loan is actually part of the, understanding for the IMF program. Because I believe that the IMF rep who spoke here at this conference indicated that if a country was defaulting and runs the risk of defaulting on loans with the IMF and the multilaterals have given it, then there was no chance that as a country that, in quotes, has become bankrupt, the fund itself will give monies to it. So that means that one of the prerequisites for the IMF program, compared to previous ones, was that you have to restructure your loan and show a capacity for repayment, of the loan. And that is what Ghana, as had been going through. It made it difficult, life really difficult, because the default has also resulted in Ghana being shut out of the, global financial markets. So apart from the multilaterals and the bilaterals, you are actually unable to borrow, for your capital projects, infrastructure. And because those are long-term loans, which complement the multilateral loans, what it also means is that you are beginning to depend on the short end of the loan market, treasury bills and banknotes, which are 90 days, 1 year, 2 years, to finance critical infrastructure. The infrastructure would not even have been appraised before the loan falls due, right? So this is creating some difficulty, for the economy.
How would you say all of this is reflecting on the standards of living of the ordinary, average Ghanaians every day?
As government generated less revenue and borrowed heavily, the loan repayments became very costly. And as we know, as economists will say, when the government is borrowing at a heavy cost, because banks and others consider the government to be more reliable after to impose taxes to pay, banks prefer to give the money, to governments, right? The other thing too is that it compounds situations like the lack of rainfall, which makes difficult for local production. So gradually inflation started going up, interest payments, as government depend on more loans, credit available to private sector meant that banks had to increase it, because otherwise it's favorable to give to governments. So that also made it expensive to produce, and as that developed, and the government found it difficult for domestic businesses, found it difficult to fill the gap. It meant that you also have to import. So you have all these phenomena coming together. A depreciating exchange rate leading to rapid depreciation of the currency. You have interest rates going up. You have the loan payments, government debt, which meant that its ability to borrow was limited, and therefore not just capital expenditure but social infrastructure which government provides us. Sometimes even wages goes into arrears. So that explains, I'm trying to explain how some of these things which may sound macroeconomic begins to affect, individual citizens.
And now that you've had your election, you have a new president, what's the expectation for 2025?
I think both parties made it clear that there was work to be done in their manifestos. So the elections per se, there's no bring to an end. It may provide some hope in terms of maybe the parties choosing between what they think, citizens choosing between what they think are the best options. But I think generally everybody knows that the problems, persist and exist,
so
which has to be resolved. Well, the new government, which is new, to the IMF program, had to inherit, the program. It has to find solutions to some of the problems that we're talking about. And so the various manifestos have come up, with various ways in which these issues are to be resolved. And one would expect that the new government, would meet with the fund, would meet with us, the IMF, was saying at today's workshop, continue to meet with the creditors and the rest, in other words, the lenders, so that there can be a gradual resolution, of the matter, so that Ghana can go back to where it was previously.
That was Honorable Seth Tekpa, a former Minister of Finance in Ghana, giving us an overview of their experience in 2024 and some expectations after that election. Going into the year 2025. Now, let's take a break. When we come back, markets are open today. Anita has intraday numbers right here on Business Incorporated. Stay with us.